All right. So there's another day of quadratics. All right. So a little more practice with SAT. Another day of quadratics. If you look at all these problems, they're all quadratic problems. Most of them, you're going to be able to solve using the quadratic formula. All right. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right. So most of them you're going to be able to solve using that equation. Just remember, a is the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, c is the number that's by itself. And it has to equal 0. If it's not equal to 0, then you have to force it to equal 0. All right. But it has to equal 0 first. All right. So you guys can try some of these problems. All right. I'll get you started with number 2. All right. So with number 2, here's A, there's B, there's C. It equals 0. All right. So since it equals 0, we're good. We know we're going to plug everything in. All right. So then it's negative B. So negative 28 plus or minus the square root of 28 squared. Anytime you substitute, please make sure you use in parentheses, especially with exponents. Minus 4 times A, which was 4, times C, which is 24. All right. The whole thing divided by 2 times A. Now, when you plug this in, all right, when you plug this in, the only thing you into your calculator, excuse me, the only thing you want to plug in into your calculator is this. Do not hit the square root key. Do not, do not hit the square root key. Okay? Make sure you're not hitting the square root key. So when you do this, you end up with negative 28 plus or minus, you end up with the square root of 400 over 8. Right? Now I'm going to stop there. I will tell you the answer is B. Okay? But you give it a try. You do. I want you to give it a try. Most of these problems, they're all same thing. All right. When they're telling you to solve the equation, solve for x, um, it doesn't matter how the answers look. Okay. SAT, these standardized tests, it doesn't matter how the answers look. X equals, the number might be by itself. Here in this case, you have just numbers by themselves. All right. Here, numbers by themselves with parentheses. Again, all this means is x is equal to 1, x is equal to negative 3. Okay? That's all these answers mean. Find the roots. The roots just mean solve for x. You're still going to use the quadratic formula. All right. Number 5. In that equation, what are the values of x? Guess what? You're still using the quadratic formula. In this case, it doesn't equal 0. Well, just force it to equal 0. Okay? Force it to equal 0. Use the quadratic formula. What are the values of x? Just use the quadratic formula. All right. Number 6. This was a tricky problem, so this one I do want to go through. They give us this equation. All right. So if d of x is equal to blah, blah, whatever, then which could be the value of a? So we're actually going to be solving. We're going to be solving for a. We're not going to be solving for x. We're actually solving for a. And they give us a little piece of information over here. Okay? They give us that piece of information. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this 1.5 and we're going to substitute it in for x. Okay? So when we do that, here's what this problem is going to look like. So you're going to say f of 1.5 is equal to negative. Now, what's being squared here? Just the x is being squared. So open parentheses, 1.5 squared plus 6 times 1.5 minus 5. Now, plug that into your calculator. All right, it's just calculator work at this point. We end up with 1.75. Okay? Now, what you're going to do with that, what you're going to do with this thing is you're going to go back to this equation. All right, let me erase all that mess. You're going back to this equation, and instead of negative x squared, now what it's going to look like is it's going to say negative a squared plus 6a minus 5 is equal to 1.75. Okay? So again, remember I told you, very beginning, remember I told you we were going to be solving for a. All right, so we're solving for a there. Okay? Now, remember what I told you when we're using the quadratic formula. It has to equal 0. So how are we going to get this thing to equal 0? We're going to subtract 1.75 from both sides. Okay? Because what is this going to equal over here? That's going to equal 0. So we have negative a squared plus 6a minus 6.75. All right? So now, when we solve, we have a is equal to, and it's going to end up being negative 6 because there's B. I know it gets a little confusing because they change why they picked the letter A. I don't know. Okay, but it gets a little confusing. So it ends up being negative 6 plus or minus the square root. B squared is 6 squared minus 4. And I know there's an A there, but the number in front of x squared, remember, or in this case a squared, that's A. I know it sounds ridiculous. So it's negative 1. And then C is negative 6.75. The whole thing divided by 2 times A, which was negative 1. So A is equal to, and like I told you in that other problem, when you plug in this stuff into your calculator, just plug that in. Do not hit the square root key, okay? So we have the square root of 9 all over negative 2. Well, A is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 9 is 3 over negative 2. Sorry, I should have left myself more space here, but you guys are good. A is equal to, here's two answers, all right? You're going to have two answers there because plus and minus. So negative 6 plus 3 over negative 2, and A is equal to negative 6 minus 3 over negative 2. Now, when you do this, please don't screw this up on your calculator. All right, there's too many students who they want to just type this crap into their calculator. All right, they just want to type this crap into their calculator. Let me leave some space. Here's what students do on their calculator, and they screw this all up. They're going to type in negative 6 plus 3 divided by negative 2. And guess what their calculator is going to do? It's going to do order of operations first. So it's going to do the division part first. You know what you want it to do. You know that you want it to do the numerator. You know that you want it to add negative 6. You know you want it to add negative 6 plus 3 first. But your calculator is stupid. So please make sure you use parentheses. All right? Please make sure you're using parentheses if you're going to use your calculator. So we end up with, on your calculator, you end up with 1.5. This one, you end up with 4.5. All right, now if you look at all the answers here, it says which could be a value of A. All right, which could be the value? Well, there's no there's no 1.5, but there is a 4.5. So the answer is B. All right. Now, all right, I wanted to do number 7. Let me sneak number 7 in over here. All right, so let me sneak number 7 in over here since I didn't leave myself enough room. I apologize about that, guys. Okay, so it's this problem. I'm just sneaking it in right there since I didn't leave myself enough room to write. All right, in this case, we can't use the quadratic formula. You'll notice that x is trapped inside these parentheses with being squared. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to get rid of everything that's around the squared. So I'm going to have to get rid of this -5, and I'm going to have to get rid of that too. Think of when you're solving equations. What goes first? You always add or subtract first. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And I have 2 times x plus 1 squared is equal to 32. And now you're going to divide both sides by 2. So then we end up with x plus 1 squared is equal to 16. Okay? Now, how do I get rid of this damn squared? Take the square root. So you're going to take the square root of both sides. I hope you remember, when you take the square root, you're going to end up with 2 answers. So the square root of 16 is the plus or minus 4. All right? I cannot stress this enough. Let me pick a different color here. I cannot stress this enough. You're going to have 2 answers. That's why you have plus or minus 4. All right? 2 answers, plus or minus 4. So then we end up with x is equal to -1 plus or minus 4. All right? So all I did was I just subtracted 1 from both sides. Let me move over here. So I have x is equal to -1 plus 4, and x is equal to -1 minus 4. Well, x equals -1 plus 4 is positive 3. -1 minus 4 is -5. So we look over back at number 7, and again, I apologize, guys. There's crap all over the place. Our answer is going to be A, 3 and -5. Okay? And then when you get down to number 8, you'll notice that it does not equal 0. Well, how do you force it to equal 0? Add 3 to both sides, move that over. So then you end up with 3x squared plus 10x plus 3 equals 0. All right? And you do it. All right, so I hope those helped. Those little hints helped.